Have you ever heard of John of God, the spiritual leader that went off the fucking rails and ended up getting charged with SA by 600 different individuals? Not only that, but there are accusations that we're going to get into at the end of this about maybe having a baby farm, which is way the fuck out there. But what's really weird is his story gets all over the place. Like, it's all over the place. To start off, his practice was completely illegal, and Brazil arrested his ass a few different times for doing this because it's illegal to practice any sort of healing practice without a medical license. But John didn't care. John of God did not care. So what he did was set up shop in this little tiny town that literally needed money because their export was a few little farming things they had going on. It was a poor ass town. So they just kind of let him do his thing. Now, this started off small. He only had a couple people come in, things like that. But the things he were doing were really interesting. Now, spiritual healing is pretty devious because it takes people's faith and twists it around for them to make a little bit of money. Here's what's kind of weird. He didn't accept money, and the reason being is maybe what he was doing at the end of this video with like selling babies. Anyway, some of his miracles kind of did work, and some people were having like tumors that were regressing and things like that, and the doctors were kind of baffled. Now, like, let's note this. A lot of them did not work, but a few of them did, and some of the doctors were like, I don't know what he's doing, but it needs to be studied because there's something happening. And one of his signature moves was tying gauze, putting it up your nose, jamming it up your nose, and like twisting around, where one doctor was like, maybe it has something to do with the prefrontal lobe or something like that. I don't know, and neither does that doctor. But back to the freaking story. Some of it worked, and people were like on board with this, and it started blowing way out of proportion, so much so that it got to Oprah Winfrey, and she did a little visit. Now, whenever Oprah ran her little episode on it, as she does with every other freaking weirdo out in the world, he went international. This is whenever 2 to 3,000 people a day, including Bill Clinton, was coming into this little town, and this town loved it because they were finally expanding and they were getting all this money. However, towards the end, John was a bit of a gangster himself and started asking everybody around him to, give him a little donation. However, if they didn't pay up, he would send one of his friends to go and visit them, and they always showed back up with the money. Now, what really got John in trouble wasn't the fake medical license or anything like that. A lady decided that she was going to get a hold of a reporter and tell him that maybe he was diddling around a little bit too much and she wasn't comfortable with it. And this reporter started looking into it. Anyways, they ran a story about this, and it blew up to where over 600 women reported SA against this guy, with a lot of them being minors, as they fucking do. Anyways, he ended up going on the run and had over like 21 houses. This guy got extremely rich off this because at the beginning of it, he really wasn't charging anything. However, the bigger he got, the more greedy he got. So whenever people started showing up for these healings, he's like, well, you're going to have to buy this and this, and you need to study this and this, and buy all this stuff off of me, to where he had like 21 houses and 50 million. He had a bunch of dollars. He had more dollars than I got. Now, at this point, he was just straight up on the run, and he decided to withdraw a bunch of his money. He couldn't, and he was like, you know what? Let me give it to God's hands and let him do what needs to be done. And he turned himself in. Now, whenever they finally arrested him, they had his trial, they did all of this, they did accuse him of all these different charges, and he got, I don't know, not very much time for 600 different accusations, but it was like 40 some years. Now, at this time, he was like 70 some years old, so pretty much he had life in prison. Great. End of story. Nope. That ain't the end of the story. COVID hit, and his scummy ass lawyers were like, oh, this poor old man, he's in this prison, he's going to get sickly and all this, so why don't we just put an ankle monitor on him and just let him live in his house? He's monitored, what's the difference? Well, I mean, there's a pretty big damn difference between being ankle monitored in your house versus being in a prison. And the judges agreed to this. They're like, okay, yeah, whatever, let him do it, because COVID, we're freaked out, everything bad's happening. Now, I was pretty pissed off about this in general. However, there was a lot more allegations that got brought up against him, and his ass went back to jail for like another 130 years. So at this point, he's going to die in prison. Now, do you remember when I mentioned Bill Clinton and the fact that this guy had all of his money? It is kind of coincidental that the Clintons got involved with this guy whenever they were involved with such scandalous things on the island. Now, here's where things get really weird. There was a email that I seen in the Epstein files. Now, the subject line of this says, "Woman who accused John of God, cult leader of the R word that I'm not allowed to say, mysteriously herself at a Spanish home." Now, under the title, it says, "Spoke of this going on at Zorro Ranch. She has said on record that Epstein offered her money to do this, birth babies for black market use." Well, if you start looking into this, you'll see that another thing that this guy was convicted of was owning all these gem mines. Now, he did own gem mines, and this is where a lot of people thought he got his money from, even though he didn't run them anymore. But there were accusations from people with a few different testimonies where they said that this guy had them pretty much kept up as slaves, and he would take these young women and pretty much turned it into a breeding farm. Now, after around, I don't know, 10 years, he would get rid of them and get a whole new set of people in it. And there's documents and things like that showing where he was selling them for around $27,000 to $70,000. So that's pretty interesting. However, a lot of people ended up kind of going away after they come out with this information. So how true it is, I don't know, but I do think it's interesting, and I don't know how connected it all is, but I'm feeling like it's pretty freaking connected. Okay, that was a lot. I had to do a lot of research for that. So if you want to follow me or like it, that'd be, you can share it if you think it's cool. Okay, okay. Thank you for watching. Have a great day. Bye.